Good evening, and welcome to a special Legislative Candidates Forum and Roundtable here at GNAT TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT. It's my pleasure to serve as your moderator tonight. We want to welcome all of you who are watching from home tonight on television, also those of you who are participating via a live stream through our website, gnat-tv.org, and also to the folks here in the studio, a live studio audience who are going to be joining in as well. Want to thank also the three candidates for being with us tonight. We're going to introduce them in a moment. Just a brief background about the district that they are going to be seeking to represent. As many of you know, it's a two-member district, a little bit unusual in Vermont. It includes the towns of Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and most of Sunderland. And the three candidates that we'll be talking to tonight will be competing for two seats, so it will be at-large voting on November 8th when folks go to cast their ballots, or by early voting if you're going to do that sooner than then. And the top two vote getters will be the winners. Let's meet the candidates. First off, to my right here at the end of the table, we have Steve Berry. He has served as a congregational minister in local parishes starting in Eden and North Hyde Park, Vermont, and also was the senior minister of the First Congregational Church of Los Angeles, California. He is currently an associate minister in the Federated Church in Castleton, Vermont, and has been active in Habitat for Humanity as well as other nonprofit organizations. Steve ran successfully for the office of state representative in 2014, the first time for a public office, and he had so much fun back in Montpelier, he's seeking to go back for a second term. Steve is also a resident of Manchester. In the middle, we have Cynthia Browning, who has served in the legislature since her first term in 2006, so she will be running for her sixth consecutive term. Originally, she represented the former district of Arlington, Sunderland, Sandgate, and a piece of West Rupert. That was consolidated into the current district following the reapportionment of the legislature after the 2010 census. When she's not serving in the legislature, she's a member of the Arlington Select Board and the executive director of the Battenkill Watershed Alliance. She was also a professor of economics as well as serving on the Arlington Planning Commission. And Cynthia lives in Arlington. Then they are both running on the Democrat Party line, I should add. They are both the incumbent office holders, obviously, and they are being challenged this year by Brian Keefe, who will be running as a Republican. Brian is a former vice president for government affairs at CVPS, Central Vermont Public Service, the former electric utility, which was acquired by Green Mountain Power. Before that, he served as a senior legislative aide to former Senator Jim Jeffords, and is currently working as an independent energy consultant. He was also a chairman of the Manchester Planning Commission and a leader of the recent Manchester 2020 initiative, and is a resident of Manchester. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping and ground rules. Would like to respectfully ask you to hold applause until the end of the program tonight. No cheering, clapping, that sort of thing, and I think we've already been told cell phones off if at all possible. Tonight's program will be presented in three parts. The first segment will be a series of questions which I will ask the candidates here. They will have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. We won't really work in any rebuttal or follow-up questions, but each will have a chance to be first, second, or third in answering those three questions. We're going to go to a short break after that, and then it'll be the turn of the audience to ask some questions. The candidates will have, again, 2 minutes to answer each question. And we may be able to work in a little bit more of a conversational kind of tone in that segment with follow-up questions and perhaps some opportunities for a rebuttal. We'll take a second break after that and then go to some emailed questions that some of you folks out there have sent in. We'll direct those to the candidates. Again, 2 minutes to respond. And once we conclude that, each candidate will have 1 minute to make closing statements. So, without any further ado, let us get started. And by dint of moderator prerogative, and where he's sitting at the table, Steve Berry gets the first question. Steve will answer that question first, and then we'll go to Cynthia, then Brian, and change the order up as we go through the three questions. So, Mr. Berry, first question, 2 minutes. What is the biggest single issue facing the district at this time, in your opinion? And if elected, what would you propose to do about it in the legislature?
I find that a very difficult question because I'm dealing with human beings that have many different issues that they're going through. So I would say that the unseen issue of poverty is huge in our county. I just went and spoke to the principals of MEMS, and they indicated that in 1 decade we have gone from 10% poverty in our schools to almost 50% poverty, but who sees it? Who sees it when they come into beautiful Manchester? I think that that's an issue that probably is not going to be top on the charts in the State House, but that's an issue that I'm concerned with and that I'll be working toward. Another issue is on how you have a larger workforce. A workforce that's going to be able to have a place to live when they come into Manchester. I think that's a big issue. We have wonderful places for them to work, but they can't afford to live here. That's something that we need to deal with here in our community. We have issues that have to do with energy. Energy is a major issue for us, but it's small is beautiful in my perspective. And so we have people who are into the solar renewable energy, and that is really, I think, something that needs to be pushed as an economic driver for our state as well as for our region. So those are 3 things that I would say I am interested in making sure that we can deal with here in our particular community.
Okay. Cynthia, same question. What is the biggest issue facing the district at this time, and what, if elected, would you do about it?
Well, I would say that the issue is economic development, and I think that encompasses some of the issues that Representative Berry has already mentioned. It certainly, if we could have more successful economic development, it would help us to address poverty and other kinds of difficulties that he referred to. I think that what I have seen at the state level is that resources have been targeted at particular companies or particular areas, and instead of doing the things that would benefit all Vermonters and all Vermont businesses, like doing tax reform and property tax reform, making sure that we have low and stable tax rates, state investments in telecommunications, in water system infrastructure, in transportation, in workforce training, and telecommunications, those can stimulate economic activity in themselves, and then they also set the foundation, set the conditions for private economic activity. So to me, this question of economic development in this part of the state is really, really crucial. And if we can do a better job on that, I think some of the other problems with poverty and other issues will be greatly improved. I would also say that the education and the Act 46 is something that I've heard a lot about, and we'll probably get to that later.
I'm sure we will. Okay, Brian Keefe, biggest issue facing the district, what would you do about it? 2 minutes.
The biggest issue we face is we have an economy that is slow right now, and it's not keeping pace with the needs of our state, some of the needs Cynthia and Steve have mentioned, and it's exacerbated by the fact that in Montpelier, the legislators continue to raise taxes to try to keep up with their increased spending, and it has a spiraling effect that is discouraging to a lot of people who live here as they see their property taxes go up and other taxes go up. And it's discouraging to businesses who see their property taxes go up and see their regulatory burdens rise. And that contributes to the soft economy. And we are challenged in this. We live in a beautiful part of the state, but we're challenged when the legislature in Montpelier, and along with the governor, gets out of balance, and they raise taxes and fees to the extent of $600 or $700 million over the past 6 years. And it's a consistent pattern, and it needs to stop, because I hear from people who are getting discouraged, whether it's living here or with their business here, that the burdens coming out of Montpelier are just too great. If we have a growing economy, as Cynthia mentioned, it increases revenues. You have more money to deal with things like poverty, which is a real thing. I was on the Manchester Community Food Cupboard Board, and I see the people that come in for food, and it's discouraging, and they are discouraged. And many of them want something better than that. Housing is a problem. When I worked for Senator Jeffords, I worked on the regional affordable housing projects in Arlington, down on 313 West and right in the downtown. And at the Planning Commission, I worked on projects in Manchester. So we are seeing some movement there, but the economy is the biggest issue.
Okay. Okay, second question, and this one we'll direct to Cynthia Browning first. Vermont Health Connect, the state's health exchange system that was established under the Affordable Care Act, has cost more and functioned less well than many hoped for when it was first launched in 2013. If elected, would you scrap the state's exchange and join in the federal exchange, or would you support continuing efforts to fix the existing exchange?
Well, it's important that everyone know that right now an independent expert is evaluating Vermont Health Connect and whether we can take the functioning components of it and make them work better and get rid of the parts that are not working, or whether we have to in fact scrap it and go to the federal exchange or go to a regional state exchange. So right now an independent expert hired by the legislature is evaluating Vermont Health Connect. This is really important because all of the evaluations of Vermont Health Connect before this were from the administration. They were not from independent experts working for the legislature. There have been independent experts evaluating it, but those comments were not always available to the public, and the administration did not necessarily listen to them. So to me, it's very important to get the report from this independent expert, and I would want to be guided by what they say in terms of our opportunities. I don't have a predisposition in any particular way, but if we can make what we have work and work better, that would be less disruptive than a transition, because you want to remember a transition anywhere else is going to take 2 years. So, and it's going to cost more money. But I also think it's important to remember that the way Vermont Health Connect was set up was part of the whole effort to get to the single payer state-financed health insurance program. And so Vermont Health Connect was set up to be more elaborate than it needed to be. In addition, Vermont was the only state that required everybody who didn't have their insurance through employment to go to Vermont Health Connect. So the policies of our current governor and the current legislative leadership made Vermont Health Connect more difficult and led to many of its problems, and then they did not fix those problems in a timely way. So I'm hoping we may be able to fix it. If not, we'll have to go to something else.
Okay. Brian, Vermont Health Connect, salvage it or dump it?
Well, I agree with much of what's...
Wait.
Oh.
I'm sorry, we have a technical delay here, so for you viewers at home, I'll try to struggle through this.
Just go ahead. Go ahead. You can have the clock right there.
Yeah.
So I agree with much of what Cynthia said, and I'm glad that there's an independent review going on. It has cost us much more than we anticipated in the beginning. I believe $200 million. Huge amount of money. The additional staff that we've had to take on at times when those monies that are being spent on staff and technology that doesn't work could be better spent on other things. The poverty and housing issues, for example, that we spoke to in the first segment. Vermont's a small state. Health insurance is very complicated. There is this federal exchange out there. I'm happy. The report is going to come out, I believe, before the next session starts. So, we will wait for that. But my inclination is to move to the federal exchange, as many other states have done. I think New Hampshire on the federal exchange is paying a lot less than we are, and as far as I can tell, are getting similar services. So my inclination, in answer to your question, is to go to the federal exchange. And I'll also say, as Cynthia mentioned briefly, that we forced everybody into this, including a lot of small businesses. And the small businesses in Vermont did not want that. And they compete with other small businesses in other states that don't have that burden. And they have had the cost and the complexity and the regulatory burden of dealing with a broken health insurance system when many of their competitors do not. And they asked the legislature not to be thrown in there, and they've been thrown in there. That, coupled with some other mandates on our businesses over the past 2 and 4 and 6 years, really make it difficult for our businesses to compete. You look at Mac Molding here in Arlington, great company. They have plants. 30 seconds. They have plants in other states and in other parts of the world. They essentially compete with those other plants. When Mac Molding as the company looks to expand and they try to decide where their next assembly line is going to go or where their next investment's going to go, they look at these costs, they look at the competitiveness, and we need to be competitive, so they make the decision to invest in Arlington instead of in Virginia or some other place.
Okay. Mr. Berry, same question. Vermont Health Connect, keep it or not?
We'll wait for the report. But it's really important to remember that even though the system failed, that the governor was willing to take a risk and to try something that was right. The entire system nationally is broken. Obamacare didn't do what it set out to do, but universal health care is the way to go. The future of our country depends upon universal health care, Medicare for everyone. Medicare works. Those people who are on it know that it works. So please, let's look at how to make it work. Not to throw everything out, not to talk about more competition between organizations. Let the government ensure that everyone can get good health care. That's what the objective is. It is nothing other than getting people good health care in a timely fashion. When I have to spend 6 months trying to get into the system, that means it's broken. But when I have to pay so much more, so much to be on co-pays or to eliminate, I have to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars before I can get my health care. Before my insurance begins to help me out, then that's wrong. And the pharmaceutical companies, and you see what's going on with Mylan and these companies, it is unbelievable, it is wrong, and that has to be fixed. So I'm waiting for the report, and then I'll make my decision.
Okay. Third question goes first to Brian Keefe, then we'll return to Steve, and then Cynthia to wrap up our first segment of this evening. Brian, Act 174, new legislation that was passed earlier this year, provides a mechanism for localities to have more say in the siting of renewable energy projects, assuming that towns develop a municipal renewable energy plan that's certified by the state's Public Service Board. Some have thought that localities should have a veto power, or more say than what was given in Act 174 about such sightings that have been proposed for their backyards. What do you think? If you're elected, would you seek to kind of try and build more say or even a veto power for localities about these renewable energy projects?
Well, I think the legislature did the right thing by giving localities more say in the siting of renewable energy projects, and I think that meanwhile, municipalities should not have veto power over energy projects. But we need to improve that whole system. We need to find a way to incorporate the local input in a much more meaningful way. And let's face it, there's a big difference between the solar projects and the big wind projects. And I think a lot of the discussion is being driven by the large wind projects. There are some solar projects that community have found offensive, but I think by and large, there's a better way to work through the system with the local solar projects. Wind is controversial. We have a broken renewable energy credit system at the state level, and we have these projects do not come without their impacts. When I chaired the Planning Commission, we had a series of hearings where we looked at the various aspects to these projects. One was being considered on Little Equinox. They're difficult questions. These are big machines. They require a lot of disturbance of the forest and of the soils. Big roads being constructed, blasting, concrete, a lot of torque on the system, the anchors, impacts to wildlife. I really think when we had the hearings in Manchester, the town was pretty split. And at the time, I leaned in favor of the larger wind projects. I have a lot of second thoughts about it now, and partly because the renewable energy component of these projects is not kept in Vermont. It's a kind of an arcane and technical matter, but we have a renewable energy program out of Montpelier that really doesn't match up to what a lot of people in Vermont really want to see.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Steve, over to you. Act 174, should localities have more say or a veto power about the siting of renewable energy projects?
I think that the municipalities should have more say. I'm right on the edge with veto power because I don't know what that would look like. I think that sometimes what you have are people who really have spent their whole life understanding energy, and they need to be able to have input into what's best for an area because they have the expertise. However, it should not, the local town has to be able to have a very strong say, and I think that maybe in some cases, if your ridge is going to be ruined, like down in Wyndham and Grafton, then you should be able to vote and say, no, we don't like the size of those towers. We need to cut those towers down to size. We don't want to have all of this energy sent out of state. We should focus on the local and then do it that way. Do it in a smart, local way. Small is beautiful. Shoemaker was right. Go with the small energy in your local municipality. Support your local solar company. Get as much as you can get done on your schools with solar and in your homes with solar, and use small wind like they have in East Dorset. We have people who are in Dorset who have a wonderful solar company. We need to rely upon them to help us to create the type of economy we want. 1 out of every 17 jobs in this state are connected to renewable energies. This is an economic driver if you do it right. And Vermont is doing it right. It's a leader in our country. And we need to just pump that up and not sell all of the electricity out of state with big wind. I reject the big wind turbines on our mountain ridges.
Okay. Cynthia, you get the last word.
Well, I would really agree with what both Brian and Steve have said, but I guess I would point out a couple of things about Act 174, which are supposed to give towns more say. Does not give them veto power, but I don't really think it gives them that much more say either, because it says that the Public Service Board has to give substantial deference to a town's plan if the town's plan has everything in it that the Public Service Board wants to have in it. So that doesn't sound like a recipe for democracy and for towns having self-determination about what goes where and how things are done. It's important to realize that jurisdiction over these energy projects has been removed from zoning. It's not subject to local zoning. It's not subject to Act 250. So all the things that we're used to going through on planning commissions and zoning boards, Act 250, they are not subject to that. So you don't have the kind of local participation. It's all done by the Public Service Board. Now they say they want to do things for what's good for the whole state. We need the renewables. I'm not sure we need industrial scale renewables that damage the environment. I think we need the small scale local renewables that the other two were speaking of. But it's a very queer legislation that says substantial deference, and nowhere in the legislation is substantial deference even defined. So I feel as if it looks as if it gives the towns more say. It's certainly good for towns to develop energy plans about where renewables will go, but I don't think they got that much more say. I don't think they necessarily should have veto power because there are a lot of different values and goals here, but I don't think they have as much say as they should. And I'm hoping that under the next administration, we'll be able to change how the statutes and regulations govern this issue so that we can achieve our goals for reducing climate change emissions, achieve our goals for renewabilities, and get the costs down through efficiency and conservation.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. That concludes the first segment of our program tonight. We're going to take a short break and be right back with audience questions. I'm sure we have some not shy folks here in the audience who will be peppering the candidates here with a few interesting ones. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Thank you.
The GNAT News Project covers local news, local information, and issues impacting Southern Vermont. If you have a story idea, send an email to news@gnat-tv.org. The GNAT News Project airs nightly on Comcast at 7:30 p.m., on YouTube, Roku, and on the GNAT website, gnat.tv.
Watch School News Update on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and on Saturdays at 9 a.m.
Hi everyone, it's Tammy at GNAT TV. At GNAT, we're all about local government, local issues, and local people. We need your help to support the programs that we do, like School News Update and the News Project. You can donate by becoming an underwriter or a supporting member. Go to our website, gnat.tv, give us a call, 802-362-7070, or stop by the studio. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting us.
Go Vermont City to City Bus Network connects you to more cities than ever before. Whether you're traveling within Vermont or to big destinations like Boston or New York City, there are plenty of options to get you where you need to go. Traveling by bus is affordable, easy, and convenient. Today's modern buses offer Wi-Fi and increased legroom. Visit connectingcommuters.org to find a list of city-to-city bus providers and route options near you.
Thanks for staying with us here for the Legislative Roundtable discussion we're having here at GNAT TV tonight. I'm Andrew McKeever, your moderator and news director here at GNAT. Now we're going to go to a second round of questions, and they're going to come from our live studio audience that's here tonight as part of a open house we're holding here at GNAT TV. And the first question is going to go to one of the candidates from Tony DuPont. Tony?
This is a question for Cynthia Browning. What is the legislature's role in the all-payer waiver?
The legislature's role in the all-payer waiver, first I'll just say a little bit about the all-payer waiver. You may see some coverage in the news about that because Governor Shumlin and the administration in Washington have come to a deal to establish this all-payer waiver. And this is a way in which the different flows of funding for health insurance and health care are combined into one flow, and then they go to the providers. So that would mean private health insurance, Medicaid, and Medicare are all channeled through the same sort of spigot to the providers. Now, it's kind of complicated because right now you don't have to be part of that. You can be part of it if you want to. There's going to be one care or an accountable care organization or some sort of structure that will channel those monies, but you can still be outside of it. One of the key things is that it's going to switch from having fee-for-service, where your doctor gets paid for seeing you or for doing a test or an exam, to providers being paid one amount to keep you healthy. And the idea is that it will eliminate unnecessary procedures or tests and other kinds of things, because they'll have an incentive to work with you to keep you healthy and do preventive things. So this is a complex area. Unfortunately, the legislature has almost no role in this because it gave it away. And it gave it away in several different times. And it was all part of the grand schemes for health reform and setting up the Green Mountain Care Board, which regulates health care and health insurance. So right now, the legislature has set up some goals for the all-payer waiver and for how it will function, but they gave the power to negotiate for this to the administration and to the Green Mountain Care Board. They relinquished their own power, and I think the legislature should have kept more jurisdiction and more power over this process, because they have very little power over it. Now, if it goes into effect, the next governor would have a chance to get out of it. But the legislature gave the power to negotiate this to the Green Mountain Care Board and to the administration, and I think that was a mistake, because the Green Mountain Care Board is not elected, they're not accountable, and I don't think they should have had that much power. That being said, I don't think this is the end of the world. It's possible that it's an experiment, it may work out well, but in my opinion, Vermont's healthcare system has had enough surgery and enough experiments, and we need to have a pause before we try to do more new innovative things. And that's what this is. So I did not support giving away that power. I think we should have waited before we tried to do this. But in fact, the governor has come to an agreement to try to channel all the money through this same spigot for some fraction of the providers and the patients. And it's an experiment, and we'll have to wait and see how it works out.
Would either of the other two of you like to jump on that question as well?
I'll just comment. I mean, this seems to me to be a lot more being thrown at us before we have the results of this independent study that Cynthia explained earlier. But the notion of the legislature relinquishing its authority over this, that came up in a specific vote last year, where the legislators in the House had a chance to say, in regard to Medicare payments, which right now stay with the seniors, so you senior citizens out there that rely on Medicare, the decision was, do we give the Green Mountain Care Board authority to take that bundle of payments and shift them into this new pool and collectively address our healthcare problems? And we had a chance to vote on that. Steve voted against the amendment that would have protected those Medicare payments. I think that's a mistake. I think we've got so much uncertainty under our health insurance system that to allow the Green Mountain Care Board at this point to get control of those individual Medicare payments is a mistake, and I worry that that's going to hurt our senior citizens.
Well, those payments aren't going to be changed to Medicare. Really, when you take a closer look at it, and when we get all the information, because nothing is decided yet, when we get every piece of information about this, as people talk about how this is going to work, then we'll be able to make a better decision. But those of you who are getting Medicare payments, don't worry, you're still going to get them the same way you've gotten them, and that's going to be on time, and you're going to be protected. So don't think this is a red flag. This is something that's just something that has to be thought through very carefully and dealt with in a judicious way.
Yes, ma'am.
So on the topic of Vermont Health Connect, y'all seem to think that $200 million is not a lot of money in a state that has like about 650,000 people. Steve, could you please explain, have you ever called up Vermont Health Connect to try to get insurance, and who supplies your insurance?
I'm fortunate because I'm one of the senior citizens that Brian mentioned. So I get Medicare, but I'll tell you what my experience with Vermont Health Connect was. I was not able to get into the system for 6 months. The story that I told a few moments ago was my story. The system was broken, and is broken, and I'm not defending the system at all. So be very clear that that's not where I've gone with this discussion. The second point is, when I get a telephone call, as I have recently, from constituents who say that their child has just been denied a prescription drug because they fell out of the system, because they made $100 too much this month and doesn't know what to do, and they call me, I have to deal with that issue, and that is a health issue, but that's a human issue, that's a human problem, and then how do you get the person back in the system? Well, I spent time with that person, taking them to Brock, going through her tax returns, and she was able to get insurance again and to get the prescription drugs for her 12-year-old who has special needs. So the issue here for me is that you're talking about numbers. I'm talking about faces of people who are falling out of the system. And the system is broken. And I told you that that's what I say as well as everyone else. How do you fix that system? How do you be compassionate to people who are falling out of the system? People who can't get their health care. People who won't get their health care because it's too costly. And yet, 90-something% of Vermonters now are on an insurance policy. So that's a plus, but we can do better.
But if they got jobs, couldn't they get insurance? If there were jobs, could people get insurance?
If they got jobs, this person, the mother, had a job. She makes $10 an hour. Then her next job, she cleans homes. What we have is a gap here. You make a few dollars too much, you fall into the abyss. And then how do you get out of it? You're disincentivized from having a job in this state because you can do better if you're on welfare.
How does that change? How do you change that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And that's a question that I work on, because that's the stuff that I'm concerned about, because that is an issue of poverty. You have to have a raised minimum wage for one thing. You can't live on $10 an hour. Try it. $10 an hour. It's not going to work. So that's number one. Give a fair wage. Then, when a child gets sick, give them earned, paid sick leave. For those good parents who want to do the good job, this woman is going to get penalized because she's out of work for 3 days. That was the maximum from her company. 3 days, and then she's out on the street. Then she has no job. Then the state will pick it up. So we have to incentivize workers and give them what they need so they want to be in good jobs and stay in good jobs, and the small businesses who employ them can afford them. So that's part of what I do. I'm in the Human Services Committee. I look at these issues very carefully.
What do you think?
May I comment?
Yes.
So I agree with Steve on the welfare cliff. I think we do have a problem with these various programs, and when someone who is benefiting from the programs reaches income level, they can be penalized, and that's something that needs to be addressed. Frankly, it's embarrassing we haven't addressed it yet in the legislature. And on the plight of your constituent who was frustrated after being on Dr. Dinosaur before, my sister's niece was working 2 jobs. Her husband worked. They had Dr. Dinosaur. They were pretty happy with it. And then we came and changed the whole system, and they got thrown into the exchange. And the program that worked for them under Dr. Dinosaur, all of a sudden, their story was not exactly, but very close to what Steve's describing, because they were thrown into a system that Steve has twice now said is broken, the state health insurance exchange. So, yes, it's about people. It's always about the people. But we have a government that needs to be sensitive to that, because Steve has examples, I have examples of the government decisions of setting up this exchange, taking away a Dr. Dinosaur that worked, and putting them into something that is a black hole, that doesn't work, that's a bureaucratic mess, and that throws them into something that they frankly don't understand and are penalized. And those human beings, those people, are the ones that get hurt by these decisions by a government that sometimes just gets a little too ambitious.
I think that in order to achieve the goals that we all share of getting the care to Vermonters that they need, we have to have systems that work. We have to do the basics really well. I think that sometimes we've gotten overambitious and tried to do too much too fast. Wanted to be the first, we want to be innovative, and we have forgotten about doing the basics really well. And that's what we need to focus on, and that's what I'm hoping the next administration, the next legislature will be focusing on. But no matter how well-intentioned you are, you have to be able to pay for what you do on a sustainable basis. Otherwise, the system will crash and burn, and it will not serve the Vermonters we care about. So it's really important to have legislators that really understand the money in the tax system and in the spending system and how to set these systems up and operate them, because in order to achieve all these goals and serve people, the systems have to work, and they haven't been working well, and that's why we have these problems.
Okay.
Just a point.
All right.
In the New York Times this week, it said that Vermont, in terms of poverty, was doing very well, one of the top states in terms of its working on the issue of poverty. But we need to do much, much better. We all feel strongly about that. We want to make sure that people are going to be safe and going to be well.
Okay, third question. Carol DeFont.
Yes, please, I'd like to direct this, I'll direct this again to Steve. My understanding right now, 52 to 53% of Vermont is on some form of welfare. And the thing that I've been most disappointed in the last few years, Vermont has lost corporations. Businesses have left Vermont. What would you do to change that?
I do a number of things, but the first one is to once again look at the issue of clean energy and see how that is going to be an economic driver, because it brings a lot of people into the state. So that's one of the things. The telecommunications issue is that broadband really creates opportunities for people. They want to have it. They'll come into the state. If there is broadband here, there will be entrepreneurs who come here. We have 5% of our state that is not wired for broadband. And I've spent time with a whole group down in Sandgate and West Rupert just this summer, talking to them about how to get their signal up, the cell phone service. People came down from the Department of Telecommunications, met with them, but that is a really big issue. That's one of the drivers for the economy in Vermont, is to have broadband, everyone having broadband, and that attracts entrepreneurs who come into the state, bring money into the state, and who have small businesses. You can't have a business in the state without broadband. The other one is digital coding. Do you know digital coding? That's a new industry. That's the new manufacturing of the 21st century. We're not doing that yet. It's new, but there are jobs there for students who do not go to college if they learn digital coding. And I'm working on a plan that I will be presenting to the principals of the school on digital coding, which will offer an example of how to drive the economy, and particularly try a pilot project in Bennington County. So yeah, I've thought about that. Now you want to talk about old manufacturing. You want to talk about 19th century and 20th century. I don't want to talk about that. That's past. Let's talk about something for the 21st century and get on board and think through the transportation system that comes via the cloud and internet and social media and all those things that our kids are tapped into. Because if we don't do it, we've missed the boat. We've absolutely missed the boat, because they will come to Vermont, because this is one of the best places in the whole world to live. It is the nicest, most beautiful, community-oriented state in the country.
Would either of the two of you like to comment on the question, or?
I guess I just think that one of the problems in the last, 6 years or so is there's been substantial policy uncertainty. There's been uncertainty about health policy related to small businesses. There's been uncertainty about everything related to health insurance. There's been uncertainty about tax rates, because tax rates change every year. So there's been a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty is the worst things for businesses. It's the worst thing if you want to make a decision to expand your business or to come to Vermont. I think we need to focus on things that help Vermont businesses, that help all Vermont businesses. Certainly extensions of telecommunications, certainly workforce training, certainly investments in water and sewer infrastructure, but it has to be for all Vermont businesses. Too much of economic development has been giving subsidies and tax credits to particular companies, and you may not even get your money's worth. Yeah. So this is why we have to make the system work better. We have to change it so that people have incentives to work through reform of both benefits and the tax code. And we have to make changes that benefit all Vermont companies, not try to bribe companies from elsewhere to come here. If they come here because you give them money, they'll leave as soon as somebody gives them a better offer. We have to do the hard things. There's no bad magic bullet. This is hard. We have to invest in education. We have to control the property taxes. We have to invest in telecommunications. It's hard. There's no magic. But I think we have an awful lot to build on. I think we can do really great things by building on what Vermonters already have. And then other people will come to join us. So I think it's very important to see we have a fresh start. We're going to have a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, a new Speaker of the House, and a new President of the Senate. And I hope to be one of the knowledgeable legislators up there holding them accountable for getting things done better for Vermonters.
Right.
The question was about affordability and poverty and the cost of living, and it goes back, I believe, to where we started this conversation, and that is the economy. And that goes back to Montpelier that has, for 6 years, got into a pattern, a habit, a ritual of passing budgets that exceed the revenue growth and then passing the taxes to pay for that gap. And it's 6 years in a row, $600 or $700 million, and people are getting frustrated. And part of the reason I was encouraged to run was that I took a look at voting records, and I want to speak plainly here, and I want to get it out before we run out of time to frankly give others a chance to respond. I looked at the voting records, and Steve, with all due respect, you voted, as far as I can tell, for every one of those budget increases and for every one of those tax increases except one. You didn't vote for one tax increase because it wasn't enough. There was an amendment to make it more, and that failed, so you voted against the budget increase because it didn't go high enough. You voted to increase property tax, income tax, soda tax, fuel oil tax, tobacco tax, bank tax, insurance tax, business tax, telephones, electric, fuel oil, propane. There's probably more, but I want to get that out there. I would not continue that pattern. And in fairness, I wanted to get this out early rather than, because we don't have any free time other than the last minute of the discussion.
Well, Steve, I'm assuming you want to respond to that.
I'd love to respond to that because I love to ask where you would make the cuts. Do you want to make the cuts? Do you want to start off with the veterans home? Do you want to cut the veterans home? Because that'll go. So tell me, would you cut the veterans home? No. Okay, you wouldn't cut the veterans home. However, that's part of the budget. So would you have voted for the budget? Would you have voted for the budget I just voted for $5 billion? Would you have voted for that?
I would not have voted.
No, you would not have voted for it. And that's the reason that you should not go to Montpelier, because you are going to slash and burn everything and not have any type of sensitivity toward what people are going through. You're going to support the top people, and the middle class is going to continue to shrink and all of that. And you're just running on the national platform of slash and burn and so on. So no, I don't mind having you tell everyone that I have in fact voted for things like weatherization and for things that help people, because I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I voted for dental therapists. That's going to cost the state something, but then more people are going to get their teeth fixed, and then they're not going to have to go to the emergency room. So I'm not unhappy with my voting record, and you can talk about that all you want, but the reality is you wouldn't have the services if I didn't vote for that budget, and you wouldn't vote for that budget, so you wouldn't get those services either.
So if I could respond.
No.
Go ahead.
We'll get to you.
I have not voted for either a budget or a tax bill in quite a few years because it was clear to me that the programs and the spending lines in the budget We're not being audited. We're not being tested for performance and bang for the buck. And the tax code is riddled with credits, deduction, and exemptions, and we can't even tell if they're achieving their policy goals. The state auditor, Doug Hoffer, who's a progressive, finds many, many programs in government that are not auditable. You can't measure whether they're achieving their goals. So the problem that I see with the way we've been approaching this is you look at the budget over here and you look at the tax code over here, you look at the capital bill, which is investing bonded dollars over here, and then over here is the pension liabilities. You need to be looking at those things in a unified framework. And you need to be evaluating tax expenditures or subsidies just as strictly as you evaluate spending items. Because when you say, okay, this business is going to get a tax credit because they say they're going to create 10 jobs, and then you can't tell whether it really worked or not, that's money. You're spending taxpayer dollars, giving it to that business, and you're not sure whether they really delivered or not. So I have not been able to vote for the spending and tax plans because to do so validated the irresponsibility of the approach that they have been taking. Of course we need to take care of Vermonters. And I had difficult struggles as to whether to vote for the budget or not because of all the things that Steve refers to as being valuable. But let me tell you this, if we continue the way we have been going, we will not be able to provide weatherization. We will not be able to take care of veterans because we will have squandered taxpayer dollars in this complex, fragmented, ineffective system. Both the budget and the tax code need massive renewal and reform. The problem is the Democrats want to do tax reform, but they don't want to do spending reform. The Republicans want to do spending reform, but they don't want to do tax reform. We need to do both. And I want to occupy the creative common sense center that will allow us to renew all of those systems, because we're not going to be able to achieve our policy goals, whether it's healthcare or in protecting the environment, unless the state government runs well.
Brian, do you want to?
I think
We have one more audience question out there.
Well,
Let Brian go first and then Steve, but if you can keep it kind of tight, that would be good.
I just want to reassure everyone that's watching that I'm not quite as mean and vicious as Steve described, and I think he knows that as well. An example of where you can do better was an amendment that came up for I think it was an $8 or $9 million tax increase to fund cleanup efforts at Lake Champlain. Laudable goal. We don't live in Lake Champlain. I don't know why we would want to raise our taxes to pay for their cleanup, because they're not going to pay for the bat and kill work that Cynthia works on. But there was an amendment sponsored by a legislator who does live up there in St. Albans, and her amendment said, hey, I found, as Cynthia was describing, I found somewhere else in the budget where we can get this $8 or $9 million. So rather than raise taxes, let's use this money that I found to clean up Lake Champlain. She lives in Lake Champlain Basin, we don't. Well, Steve voted against that amendment. He'd rather raise our taxes than let it come out of the existing budget. So no, I am not in favor of shutting down the Veterans Home, not going to do that. But there are other ways to make choices. And I think the governor actually sort of is admitting that now, because he's asked his state agencies to come up with a level budget, even though revenues will grow, level budget. And he's asking them to look at programs that can be eliminated. So that's what's going on right now. That's Governor Shumlin, who's responsible for a lot of this growth, along with a lopsided, out of balance legislature. And I think it's time, as Cynthia was describing, that we be a little bit more careful in how we spend the taxpayers' money.
Just
Steve, real brief.
a comment on that. It's not just Lake Champlain, Brian. It's the entire state of Vermont. There are problems all over the state of Vermont. Champlain, because it's such an economic driver, it's such a big lake and so many people go there, that is sort of like a focal point, but it's not just there. We need to do a better job of making sure that the entire state has clean water and that the soil is clean and we don't have put pollutants into the streams and rivers. So that's why I think that that's a responsibility that all the citizens bear, not just a few people. I think that part of what happens with taxes is that you pay so that everyone has a better chance. I don't go back to the budget. Brian, do you know who voted for the budget in the Appropriations Committee and what the budget came out as when it went from appropriations to the floor? Do you know what that vote was?
I think I've read that it was passed unanimously.
It was passed unanimously. And do you know who comprised that budget, who actually are on the Appropriations Committee?
I can't sit here and name them. No, Steve. I know a lot of people.
Okay. Well, there were very conservative people. There were very liberal people. And there were very moderate people. And they drew consensus, 11-0. That is the budget that they thought the state of Vermont should adopt. And that went to all of those members, and it was passed through the House. And the reason why it was passed was because it was fair, and it was just, and it didn't eliminate everything, but it was the closest we could come to having a fair budget, and you didn't vote for it. And so when she doesn't vote for it, that means no veterans home, even though she supports a veterans home. Even though Brian supports a veterans home, if you vote against the budget, then you don't fund the programs, period.
Well, that's just a false choice, Steve. You know
No,
that.
that's
There's
true.
ways
That's
to
true.
amend bills and fund something and balance it without raising taxes, which has happened.
But also, they that committee was looking at the spending in isolation. They weren't looking at the capital bill. They weren't looking at the tax code. They just had the spending. So it's an incomplete view, and they didn't have a chance to do the kind of analysis they should. I was actually asked, will I vote for the budget in order to get money for the veterans home? That's what they do. They say, if you want money for the veterans home, you have to vote for the budget. I want money for the veterans home. But if you start going down that path, you've given away your independence. And you have to make the calls that you see as you see fit. And I think it would be better to do tax and budget reform and find enough money for the veterans home than to keep adding on this and that and that and more taxes and more spending programs that, remember, are not auditable. We can't even tell if they're achieving the goals that we want them to achieve. That's not right.
Okay. Well, Carol, that was a good hand grenade you lobbed up here. We have another question from the audience, but we're going to have to take a short break here at this point. Jerry, we're going to go back. When we start, we'll go right to your question.
I'm not sure I want to ask them. I think they've
Okay, well,
covered it all.
we'll find out when we come back. But right now, we just have to break away for a few minutes. We'll be back with more questions from perhaps the audience and also emailed questions that you folks have sent in. Stay with us. We'll be right back, and we'll see you shortly.
The GNAT News Project covers local news, local information, and issues impacting Southern Vermont. If you have a story idea, send an email to news@gnat-tv.org. The GNAT News Project airs nightly on Comcast at 7:30 p.m., on YouTube, Roku, and on the GNAT website, gnat.tv.
Watch School News Update on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and on Saturdays at 9 a.m.
Hi everyone, it's Tammy at GNAT TV. At GNAT, we're all about local government, local issues, and local people. We need your help to support the programs that we do, like School News Update and the News Project. You can donate by becoming an underwriter or a supporting member. Go to our website, gnat.tv, give us a call, 802-362-7070, or stop by the studio. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting us.
Go Vermont City to City Bus Network connects you to more cities than ever before. Whether you're traveling within Vermont or to big destinations like Boston or New York City, there are plenty of options to get you where you need to go. Traveling by bus is affordable, easy, and convenient. Today's modern buses offer Wi-Fi and increased legroom. Visit connectingcommuters.org to find a list of city-to-city bus providers and route options near you.
And we're back. Thanks for staying with us for our special legislative roundtable discussion with our three legislative candidates for the Bennington 4 District. Had a lively and spirited discussion so far, and we're going to continue that with a few more audience questions before we go to the email questions that you folks have sent in, time permitting. And I believe Mike Norath has the first question for us at the moment. Mike.
It was mentioned earlier that we'll have a lot of new legislative leaders this year. I'm wondering, from the three candidates, what qualities would you be looking for in a Speaker of the House other than party label?
Who wants to take that one on first?
I'll go. I would want someone who's willing to face reality and make decisions based on realities, not politics or ideology or wishful thinking. I'd want someone who has courage. I'd want someone who has really solid moral and ethical values. And I'd want someone who could communicate well with the members of the House and with the public.
I think that having Shap Smith as the Speaker of the House was a blessing for all of us. I think that he has set a tone of fairness and respect, sometimes even in the midst of being disrespected. He was always, I think, fair, gave the opportunity for the minority party to have a say that was taken seriously. His voice was a voice of reason and thoughtfulness and compassion. And I think that those are really great qualities for a Speaker of the House. And I'm going to miss Shap because I think he taught us a lot as a newbie there, just in the way in which he dealt with the complexities, but it's a highly complex job. And I think it's whoever takes it over is going to have their hands full. But it doesn't matter to me so much the party. What does matter is that the person is fair and just and does the best for the people of Vermont. And it's not all one thing, it's many things. And you have to learn to deal with people and to treat them well and learn how to stand your ground and fight when you need to, but also how to also back off and take it easy and listen and learn and lead. And I hope the next speaker can do it.
I would look for someone who can work across party lines and bridge some of that gap. There's been such an advantage for the past several years of numerically Democrats over Republicans, Democrats and progressives over Republicans, which creates an imbalance that just gives the majority party quite an advantage. And I agree with a lot of what Steve just said about the past speaker, Shap Smith. Very decent guy, very smart guy, very organized and able to get things done. But I don't give him that much credit for working across party lines, and partly because he really didn't have to that much because he had the numbers so often in his favor, and that gave us the result of higher spending and higher taxes as a pattern in lockstep with Governor Shumlin. And just one quick example of that lack of working across party lines, Steve wrote about the worker classification bill a couple weeks ago in the Journal, and it was a very complicated issue and a very important issue, I think, for Vermont's economy to help straighten out these classification on what is an employer, what's an employee, what's a self-employed. It's a difficult issue, but Steve explained a lot of it. What Steve didn't mention, he kind of brushed over, was he said it passed out after 2 years. The House Commerce Committee passed it with unanimously. So, like your previous example, unanimous committee approval after 2 years of work gets to the floor of the House, and it died. It died. There was not going to be a discussion of it. There was not going to be a vote on it. Very important issue. A lot of work by the committee. Unanimous. Didn't go anywhere. So, and Shap controlled that process. And that's not a personal swipe at Shap Smith because, like I said, he's a very decent guy and a very bright guy. But as far as the question, I would look for somebody who's a little, people who want to work across party lines.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Oh, this gentleman here. And we'll get to you in a second, Theo.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for your service. I know it's difficult and it's something you guys do out of a labor of love. I know this is not necessarily an economic consideration, what you're doing here. My question is, what specific programs do you envision for this district with respect to economic development?
Is there one candidate you'd like to direct that question to first?
No, just in general.
Okay. Cynthia?
I think that the whole extension of telecommunications coverage is key. I know many of us do have good service, but there are still corners of southwestern part of Vermont that don't. And if everybody gets connected, well, first of all, they might be able to get GNAT. I mean, that'd be great. If everybody gets connected, it actually benefits that there are people who are already connected. I mean, you may think, I've got good service, I don't care about those other people. No. The more people who get connected, there are like network effects. So that it benefits you if you're already in the network. In addition, it benefits economic development in the small towns. It allows someone to move up to Vermont and telecommute or run a business from their home. It's very, very important. It's part of that 21st century. I actually was able to get $350,000 in the capital bill to fund extensions in some of these uncovered and underserved areas in the capital bill this past session because everybody agreed it was really important. So I think that's very important. But I actually think that what we need to focus on most is things that help all Vermonters, the tax reform that will help all Vermonters, and the programs, the water and sewer projects that will help many communities in Vermont, particularly the smaller communities. Too much of the economic development resources is focused in Chittenden County, which is already developing very fast. And we don't get enough of that. But I don't think it needs to be targeted things like a handout for this business or a handout for that. It needs to be the basic things that help everyone. And I personally would include reforms to Act 46 because I think we've created tremendous policy uncertainty in our schools and in our communities, and people are spending all this time on this governance issue and they're in boxes and it doesn't fit our communities, and they knew it didn't fit and they did it anyway despite my efforts to amend it or to change it. So, so I think that if we could loosen up the Act 46 criteria, if we could make the changes that will benefit all Vermonters, get telecommunications better, water and sewer better, I think that will be what will work for this part of Vermont. But there is no magic bullet.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off right there. Sorry if I may.
Telecommunications is really, really key, and we're on the same page with that. And you worked really hard. You went for I think $500,000, only got $300,000.
Right.
But did you vote for that? Did you vote for the capital bill?
It was in the capital bill, so yes, I voted for it.
So she voted for the capital bill. But I think that one of the things that we need to look at is really a sense of what the next generation is going to come up with. You know, what are we going to do for the next generation coming through? And how do we support the small businesses that are here now? How do we incentivize them? How do we cut their taxes, actually? How do we do that? And also, you know, there are issues about affordability living here. How can we afford to live here? You know, and so the issue is not a crazy issue to talk about lower taxes. We have to lower taxes, but how do you do it? You know, what's going to come up is going to come up the carbon tax. We're going to be discussing a carbon tax. Well, the carbon tax is a big issue. That also needs to be really scrutinized. I don't know where I'm going to stand on that when all the information comes in, but I'll tell you this. I think that dealing with a carbon tax is a possibility for restructuring our whole tax structure. Lessening property taxes, lessening sales taxes potentially. And if it's done right, there's a chance there. And that will also incentivize people to want to come here and have an economic district in southern part of Vermont. So I think that Cynthia's absolutely right about tax reform. One of the things that I do is that I can work with everybody to get stuff like that done.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Brian.
I agree with most of the points Cynthia raised as far as telecommunication, and just in the spirit of getting along here, I'll mention there was a $1.6 million tax increase that I would have voted for in unison with Steve, and that had to do with the telecommunications funds.
Yeah.
And that's because I would have supported that because, as Cynthia said, up north they've got most of their build out, so why do they want to invest in Arlington and Sunderland and Sandgate?
Exactly.
And it's our turn to get this build out. So in that sense, I would support that. I also think the job of a legislator is to, in a broad sense, make sure the infrastructure and the highway and the funding, in the formula, we get our fair share. And I think Act 46 and the school governance consolidation is something that we need to watch very closely because, again, up north, they're able to do a lot of this stuff rather simply, and it's more challenging here just because we have a lot of different school sizes. And just real quickly, I wasn't going to bring up the carbon tax, but that's a proposal to raise gasoline taxes 90 cents and fuel oil taxes $1 and propane by something like that. It's a big tax. Steve co-sponsors the bill to impose that carbon tax. He's the only legislator, Democrat or Republican, south of Route 4 on this side of the mountains that did that. So nobody else in Bennington County supports it. And yeah, it's going to be a big discussion. And frankly, I think Vermont already is doing its fair share to combat global warming and carbon emissions. We for instance, our trees and environment take in more carbon than we put out, according to the state figure. So there's that. And we have a tax on fuel oil that you could call a carbon tax. We have a tax on electricity that you could call a carbon tax. We have tax incentives. We have regulatory incentives. We have preferential buying at the utilities. We pay a lot right now to encourage, and I support much of these things. We have a lot we do to encourage conservation, efficiency, renewable energy. We do much more, I would say, than any other state. And meanwhile, we destroy more carbon than we create. So I just think with so much going on and with our economy so fragile and with our taxes continually rising every year, they're going to talk next session about a carbon tax, 90 cents on your tank of gasoline, $1 on fuel oil, and I just don't think now's the time to do that.
But that's
Okay.
that's
Steve,
not sure that what that figure is going to be, though, Brian.
Steve,
we don't
that's
know.
the consensus.
We don't know
Steve,
what that's going. Yeah.
We have one more audience question we've got to get to because we're kind of running low on time. Theo.
This question is basically about states' rights, and we're seeing on the federal level our government sort of losing its mind this season. I'd like to hear who you're voting for, how you stand on the current election, and also about GMOs and how the Vermont passed good legislation and then the federal government sort of got rid of all our work. So how do you stand on standing up for Vermont in terms of standing up to the federal legislature? And Brian, I'd like to hear about how you feel about reform on medical marijuana laws.
Before any of you start, just be reminded we're kind of
That's
really
three
running low.
questions.
GMOs and state rights.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. All right. I believe in what's called the principle of subsidiarity, which means that decision-making power should be at the lowest possible level where people know the most about an activity. It's not that you don't need guidance from the top, principles, directions, but you want to be careful about consolidating and concentrating too much power. You have to get the right balance about that. I supported Vermont's GMO law. I voted for it. I think it was better than what they did now in Washington, and I think we should have the right to do that. And we lost
Absolutely,
that battle.
right. Absolutely.
So that's where I stand about that.
Yep.
But this goes to many of the other things. It isn't just Washington trying to control what Vermont does. It's Montpelier trying to control what our communities do. So we need to try to get a better balance between the principle of centralization and the principle of decentralization. And I think that at both the national level and at the state level, we may have gotten too centralized. And Montpelier or Washington starts to think they know best about all kinds of stuff. And they may in some cases, but they need to prove it. And I would agree with Brian that in many cases, Montpelier has proven that they do not know what is best for us, and that more power should come down to this level. In terms of legalizing marijuana, I've got 3 things from legalizing marijuana. You have to be able to prove that you can reduce the rate of use of substances of all kinds by young people. You have to have a roadside sobriety test, and you need to be able to get along with the federal government, which still classifies it as a very serious drug. That was not met this past session. I'm open to the discussion, but they did not meet my criteria. You wanted to know who I'm voting for? Did you want to know?
If you want, no pressure.
I disagree. You asked that question, and I'm not going to duck it. I will be voting for Hillary Clinton for president because I think she's competent, she's trained, she's experienced, and I'm sorry to say that the Republican nominee is none of those things, in my opinion.
I'll start there. I'm voting for Hillary Clinton, and I'm voting for her because she has great experience and knowledge and understanding, and the other candidate does not. I would say that states' rights are really important. If you look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership, you've written about that, Andrew, and I have too. And we take different sides on that. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a flawed push through in the federal government, which is going to strip Vermont of its brand. You won't be able to have Made in Vermont once that takes over, because the way it's being structured now, there will be an offshore judiciary that will determine whether or not you have an unfair competitive advantage in your state for a certain product. So Vermonters, you can say bye-bye if the Trans-Pacific Partnership goes through, like the labeled GMOs went down the tubes, taking away more of the sovereignty of the state. That is a big, big mistake. I am for states' rights. And you know, we make mistakes as we go along in our government, but we try really hard to keep it local, and we have to do a better job. So I agree with Cynthia on some of the aspect of too much power in Montpelier, but no, this is magnified in the federal government. It's just huge, but in Montpelier, it's not as much power because it's a citizens' government. We're still citizens running the government, and we're still people. It's still a citizens' legislature, and we bring our expertise and interests and knowledge and the people's voice to Montpelier, and that's what's so good, because that's not happening in other states. And I'm on the Assembly of State Legislators, on the executive board, and it's not happening in other states. Believe me, they do not sit at a table together like this. They don't do it, but they do it in Vermont, and I love that. That's one of the best things about being a legislator. And the other part that you're talking about, which was, marijuana. Yeah, I voted against both renditions of the marijuana thing, except for medical marijuana. I pumped that up in Human Services because there are people who could not get their medical marijuana, which was your question, not about the legalization of marijuana, but so that people could get, for their now even glaucoma, within 30 days rather than wait for 6 months and go through a court system and so on. And so I think that when we come to that time to talk about marijuana, it's not about legalizing it for economic incentive just now, and I would question whether or not that's even a great idea, seeing what's happening in Colorado. They're getting a lot of money, but they're getting a lot of problems. But I do think that in Vermont you should be able to grow your own, and that you shouldn't be penalized for it, and that you should be on a list and pay your fee, $150 or whatever, and have your 2 plants, and everybody let you alone. That's what I think you should do.
Brian, you get the last word on this one.
I think medical marijuana is fine. I think there's some, as far as the legalization of marijuana, I think there's a lot of questions to work out before we take that step. The GMO law, I think that's settled by now. On the presidential election, I have a lot of friends that are go both ways, and I'm sure people in the audience and at home have that as well. And I find a lot of people that are frustrated the choices at the top of either ticket. I had a chance to vote for the presidential nominee back in March, the primary, and I voted for John Kasich. I thought the governor of Ohio would be a great Republican leader, and he fell off, and everybody fell off, and we have who we have. And I have a big libertarian streak, and I think if the election was held today, I might vote for Gary Johnson and go that way.
Okay, we have time for, I think, one emailed question. And I'm going to combine a couple that we got just in the interest of trying to kind of make as many people happy as possible here. A number of them came in on Act 46, and we touched upon that briefly at one point in your discussion. But if I can paraphrase a couple of these questions here, folks are interested in what your positions are on Act 46, particularly with regard to school choice. Do you feel the act is taking us in the right direction or not? I guess would be basically what the synthesis of these questions would be. So, Steve, would you like to go first on that one?
Yeah, I voted for Act 46, and I think that's when I went from door to door and listened to folks. They had a lot to say about property taxes, and it was one of the ways in which you deal with that. There are other aspects of Act 46 which are important, and that is that all children in the state of Vermont are given the best education that they can get. I like school choice because I like school choice. I like the opportunity for people in Sandgate to choose where they want to go where they don't have a school. And I support it here in town, but it's like having your cake and eating it too. It's very, very difficult. I think there needs to be cost containments in the school. I think consolidation is important. And I think that the discussions that Manchester, Dorset, and the mountain towns are having are really important. And it'll be interesting to find out what they come up with. But they're talking about some sort of a relationship. I don't know what they're going to call it. Maybe one school district. I don't know. But I think that school choice is really important, and I've worked across the aisle in the State House with a lot of Republicans, Vicki Strong and others on school choice issues, and support that, and have from the very beginning. I support our local schools, school choice here, but let's not forget the children who don't have an opportunity to go to a really top-notch school. Let's make sure our public school is really the best we can make it for all those children who deserve to have also really good education. Let's not forget them.
Cynthia.
Well, I voted against Act 46. I tried to change it while it was in passage, and I tried to amend it this past year. I believe that consolidation and mergers where it makes sense for communities, for districts, it makes educational and financial sense, they absolutely should consolidate and merge in the ways that make sense for their quality of education and their cost structure. The problem with Act 46 is it sets up a really complicated framework and a system of carrots and sticks, and it says you have to merge in some kind of way. And it doesn't always make sense. The school choice problem is not so much the districts that have complete school choice, because they can join with other similar all-choice districts. The problem is if you have a district that's K through 6, a district that's K through 8, they cannot merge. They may be right next to each other. They cannot merge. Under Act 46, you have to have the exact same pattern of tuitioning and operating in order to merge. So they made the mergers voluntary, and the School Board of Education, if you don't merge in a satisfactory way, in several years the School Board of Education will have the power to merge you, to force you to go somewhere. And this could include dissolving the local school board. and forcing the district into one of these larger boards. That's wrong. This is an unelected school board. They should not have that power. This is part of that pattern where Montpelier thinks they know best. And some districts, they're afraid they're going to lose their small school grant, or they're going to afraid they're going to be punished, and they're going to end up giving up some of their choice in order to merge because they're afraid they're going to be told to do something even worse. That's wrong. Shotgun marriages are not going to last. When they passed Act 46, they knew it made no sense, given the pattern of schools in Manchester and Bennington and Shaftesbury and Arlington and St. Kitts. They knew it. The Secretary of Education came down
Cynthia,
here.
I feel your passion, but we're running out of time.
All right.
Cynthia,
Not a fan of Act 46.
Got it. Okay.
Cynthia's absolutely right. Act 46 is not about saving because nobody shows that it's going to save any money. It's about control for Montpelier. It's about consolidation of governance for towns like Charlotte, Heinsberg, and Shelburne up north, all underneath CVU already doing their busing and their billing and their subbing and everything else together. They consolidated into one board, the elementary schools, the K through 8, because they all matched up. It was tailor written for three Chittenden County towns like that, quite towns that do quite well. They get a 10-cent tax break, every taxpayer. Who pays for it? We do. And I'll say this, and as far as school choice goes, I'm a big fan of school choice. Every single decision from the Department of Education since Act 46 passed has been to discourage school choice, to deny school choice, to thwart school choice, even though the act itself says that nothing in this act will deny school choice.
That's right.
And so, again, Montpelier, I'll stop.
Good job. Okay, folks, we have a few minutes. We just have about enough time for each of you to give a 1-minute closing statement. So let's see. Why don't we start with Brian here, since he was the last one to go first in the opening round. Brian, you've got 1 minute to tell the voters why they should vote for you and whatever else you may want to say.
Well, thanks, Andrew, and thanks to GNAT for sponsoring this, and to Steve and Cynthia for joining in this discussion. I'm a first-time running for office for the first time. I worked for Jim Jeffers for about 15 years. I worked for CVPS, the utility, for 6 years. I have a son who's 23, a daughter who's 17. We're here because we love this area. We came back to Vermont. I grew up in Vermont. My wife Leslie grew up in Vermont. We came back here from Washington, D.C. because we wanted to live here and raise a family. And we love it here. And I think it's the greatest. I'm one of 8 myself. I have siblings in various towns. My parents still live in Fairfax. But this area, Manchester, it could be Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, it's beautiful. This is the place to be. And meanwhile, we need to really watch what's going on up north, because it's getting more and more difficult for people down here to make a living. And that's why I'm running, because I hear that and I want to help.
Thank you, Brian. Cynthia, your turn.
Okay.
There you go.
I guess what I would like to say in asking for the vote of the voters in this district is that I think that I've proven that I have the knowledge and the judgment, the courage and the independence to represent you well in Montpelier. I have been very, very aggressive in holding my own party accountable for what I see as their flaws in policy, in design, in budgets, in taxes. Whoever is the next administration, I will be just as hard on them. I feel I have to be loyal to my own principles and to my knowledge as an economist, and to be giving the best possible representation to the people of this district. Policies must be designed and implemented based on reality, not wishful thinking. Policies must be benefiting all Vermonters, not special interests. And policies must be sustainably financed.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Cynthia. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, Andrew, with you and with here at GNAT, and thank you both, Brian and Cynthia. My sense is, how can we be good citizens and take care of each other? How can we live a just life? How can we live in this beautiful land and take care of it environmentally? What can we do? How can we create healthier citizens? How can we save money by doing smart things like prevention before people get into problems? If you're spending $340 million in rehabilitation for drugs and only putting $3 million into prevention, then I think that you've really skewed it in the wrong direction. I'm very practical in this way. When I talk about things like weatherization, what I talk about is making sure that people get that, because it's better than putting a one-time, filling up your oil tank one time for one winter, and that is out, and then that money is burned. But if I do weatherization, I can have that home going on for a long, 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 long time, and those people get money into their pocket. We reduce the carbon footprint, and it's just good policy. That's what I work for in Montpelier, and I'm honored to do it.
Thank you, Steve. And thank all of you for watching tonight. This has been a special legislative roundtable discussion. Why do we have a round of applause for all the candidates? Thank you all for being here. Hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, tell your friends about it. Share it on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. All of that good stuff. And one last program note, on November 8th, we will also be doing a live special election night coverage, so you'll want to tune in for that one as well. This is GNAT TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director of GNAT TV. A pleasure to be with you tonight, and thank you all for coming.